Isn't that nice?
Okay.
All right.
Ta-da. All right, so I began my career actually in Japan, where I did my MBA and had a consultancy there, and came back and did the same here, and then ended up doing a master's in geriatrics and focusing more on working with caregivers in care management, and also doing coaching and consulting with long-term care companies. Made my way into ministry and said, well, let's use these skills in churches. And so I've been working with churches, especially in the Illinois conference, the UCC, but also work with entire conferences to do things like the Missouri Mid-South Conference and even in other denominations. And then finishing my doctoral work in community organizing, which was very well. So glad to be here with you all. And I want to start today with, we started with a prayer, and I want to echo it with another one. So what we're doing now is embarking on a journey, right? This isn't a quick, okay, go through each step and everything's perfect and hunky-dory. We have to commit to this journey together. And so Pierre Desjardins was a mystic, we'll say, a Jesuit priest. And this was his prayer. Above all, trust in the slow work of God. We are quite naturally impatient in everything to reach the end without delay. We should like to skip the intermediate stages. We are impatient of being on the way to something unknown, something new. And yet it is the law of all progress that it is made by passing through some stages of instability, and that it may take a very long time. And so I think it is with you. Your ideas mature gradually. Let them grow. Let them shape themselves without undue haste. Don't try to force them on as though you could be today what time, that is to say, grace and circumstances acting on your own goodwill, will make of you tomorrow. Only God could say what this new spirit gradually forming within you will be. Give our Lord the benefit of believing that his hand is leading you, and accept the anxiety of feeling yourself in suspense and incomplete. So that's where we're at. We're committing to this, the tension, the suspense, the incompleteness, and all the good stuff too, right? It's like we have to go through before we emerge on the other side. So we would kind of enter this journey together during Lent with that mindset. So first of all, we're talking about healing. So what even is healing? Many times we jump into things and we don't define the words and terms, and we assume we're all talking about the same thing. So what is healing?
Well, depends on different things, but I'm,
Oh,
oh yeah,
nobody at home can hear.
nobody at home can hear, like
Yeah.
nobody can hear me. I mean, learning in nursing school, you had different stages of the healing. You had things that were healed by the first infection, depending on what had been done. You know, you could bring a wound together, and immediately knit it together, and it's going to heal together. Could be almost seamlessly. Things that were left to kind of fester will eventually heal, but they take much longer, and they leave scars. So that's bringing things back together, mending a hole, or something that's broken.
Okay, mending a hole, bringing something back together. Yeah. And the longer it sits, the longer it takes to heal.
Right.
Right.
And the bigger the scar leaves.
Yeah. Yeah. Good, thank you. Yeah. Pass the mic over.
Thank you. I think when she commented on the physical part of healing, I think when relationships heal, you're like reconciling.
Okay, reconciliation, I like that. So we've got the physical aspects of healing, we've got the
That way.
relational, emotional aspects.
Healing is a process. Going ebbs and flows and make good progress, take steps back. There's no timetable on it. But it takes time. Process.
Yeah, it's a process. Good. I'm gonna put these down.
Lest we forget.
So tell me what you're putting down.
So I've got a process, a reconciliation, bending back to wholeness. Yeah, we've got going back to wholeness like that. Yeah.
Just keep it here until somebody else needs to talk about that. So you're gonna badger me.
Sounds like a plan.
Last person that talks keeps it.
Well, also, sometimes it isn't necessarily bringing back to wholeness. I'm thinking of, say, someone who had to have an amputation. Okay, you have to bring back and get some healing over the area that's lost, and then learning how to deal with the missing limbs.
Yeah.
That's all part of healing too.
It is. In fact, in a real life example of that, my partner's brother has cancer and he had to have his leg amputated. And he would just suddenly start spurting blood from his stump. And finally, they took him back to surgery. This is going on for months. Right? It looked like a bloodbath. Took him back to surgery. He's in Ireland, and realized that when they did it, you got your veins in your arteries, and they're not going to your feet anymore. You gotta, do the right stuff to put them back together, so they're not just have an artery that just spurts when it wants to. So kind of a little misstep there. It just shows that there's a lot of things that we have to focus on along the way, right? So it may not be a wholeness. It's a new version of reality. And I think that's a very important thing to remember, because a lot of times when we think of healing or wholeness, it means going back to the way things were. But that's not wholeness. Everything around us has changed. And here we are in a mindset of going back to the way things were. Well, that creates tension. So we want to remember any reality is the current reality, not the way things used to be. So that's kind of an idea of healing. What about anger? What is anger?
Anger is a lot of frustration.
Frustration. Yeah.
I just want to say that's exactly what I was thinking. I have 3 teenagers, so.
No, me too. That was my word, frustration.
What else? What else would you define anger?
It's a secondary emotion.
Ah, secondary emotion. Let's flesh that out a little bit.
Yeah, but you were second.
Well, what would be a primary emotion?
Hurt.
Hurt, right? I would say hurt is the primary emotion.
Fear.
Fear, yes,
Disappointment.
sure. Right, and especially with fear, right? All of these then stem to anger. Right? Anger is not the first thing. Like if you offend me and I get ticked off at you, I'm not ticked off at you because of what you said. I'm ticked off because you bruised my ego. Right? I'm upset because you hurt me, hurt my feelings, so to speak. And now my defenses have been activated. So let's think about this neurologically. We've got our amygdala, right? It's what our fight or flight, our old evolutionary primitive brain. So
Call it brainstem.
the brainstem right below it, yeah, all that fun stuff. So the amygdala, whenever we feel threatened, it gets activated. But what happens when the amygdala gets activated? What are the results neurologically, physiologically?
Like the fight or flight.
Mhm. And what happens in your body and your mind when you're in fight or flight mode?
You're back.
Yeah, your body, your muscles, everything tenses up, and people have to realize how to, that affects your body when you have anger.
Yeah.
And so it's not healthy, and so you have to figure out, okay, where is it really affecting me, my
Mm.
body? Some it could be, shoulders, it could be, so that's something that you have to figure out.
Yeah, so embodiment, right? Where are those emotions embodied in you? You had something.
I was gonna say your heart races, your blood pressure goes up.
Mhm, mhm. Blood pressure goes up, CO2 levels go up, right?
Yeah.
Start gasping, shorter breaths, I'm not taking those good deep breaths. What about up here? What starts happening when
It gets switched off.
it's switched off? Everything's processing back here. You're focused on that saber-toothed tiger right in front of you and how you're gonna spear it and stay alive, right? Whatever that saber-toothed tiger is, the person who hurt your feelings or whatever it is, right? When that happens, you get tunnel vision. All you can see is that which is in front of you. So literally your peripheral vision is cut off, but also in your mind, you are unable to think of other possibilities or solutions, right? You are fixated on this is the enemy and we're gonna have it right now. You're not able to get up to your prefrontal cortex and say, well, maybe that's not quite the reality. Maybe this isn't the saber-toothed tiger, maybe it's a little kitty, or maybe they didn't hurt my feelings, maybe it was, I just wasn't in a good place when I heard it, and it affected me in a different way, right? So remembering that anger is a secondary emotion, and then what its effects are, right, really important, because a lot of times we get our feelings hurt, and then we hold on to that, anger, but also the idea that I am not letting go until that person apologizes for hurting my feelings or does what I want them to do, or whatever the case may be. We get stubborn, right? Because we don't take the time to do the work to get out of here and get back to here. And then the embodiment connecting these two. Where if you ask yourself, like when you're angry, and you can be aware of the hurt aspect of it, and kind of ask yourself, where is that hurt? Where does that hurt reside? Right? You can start to unpack that and get into the deeper story of where it comes from. Maybe you didn't feel the support you needed from your parents or from a spouse or whomever, and it's still a wound. It's not quite become a scar yet. And somebody scraped that little wound or big wound, right? And activated hurt, which led to anger. So let's now talk about shame and guilt. What is guilt?
I think it's a form of regret.
Regret. What else?
I think it's a sign of growth.
Hmm.
Like, my kids and I talk about that if you feel bad about something, that's kind of a good thing, because you're like growing and realizing there might have been a different way.
Yeah.
So trying to make it not be so bad, but a little positive, that you'll do it different next time.
Yeah, I like that. It's that idea that FAIL is an acronym for first attempt in learning. Right? Fail. We tried one way, it didn't work. Okay. I'm gonna grow from it. Hopefully I didn't hurt too many people's feelings when I tried it that way and it didn't work so well. But we'll do some mending, some healing. And grow together. What's shame? Are they the same thing or is there any difference? And you all out there in TV land, feel free to chime in at any time.
you're familiar with Brene Brown, and Pastor Brandyn knows I love Brene Brown. She would say guilt is doing something wrong and shame is that you're a bad person to the
Okay.
core.
Yeah, love that. Love Brene Brown. Yeah, so just using a simple analogy, you're at home, you're gonna pour yourself some milk, or you're putting it in your coffee or in a cup for some cookies, and you spill it all, you drop it on the thing, and now you got milk all over the kitchen floor. Stop doing it, I should have held on to it better. Versus, I am such a freaking idiot, why do I do such stupid things? One's guilt, should have done better, and I'll do better next time. Right now, I'm gonna grow from this, I'm gonna know. Don't hold the milk when my hands are greasy from deboning a chicken or whatever, right? Try your hands before you pick up the milk carton. And then the other one just says, I'm a bad person, right? I'm no good, that's why these things happen. So now, let's rewind with anger, secondary emotion. Right, healing this process that we go through together. And we've got shame and guilt. So now if we back up and kind of look at them and how they come to be, right? So we've got our beliefs, right? We're all predisposed to certain biases and beliefs. And sometimes we can think through them and then they kind of become manifest. And other times it's just programmed in there until we change the story, right? And then we act out of those. So our beliefs affect our actions. And whatever our belief is, that's the way we're going to act. And then our actions are going to elicit our outcomes. Okay. So somebody try to give me an example of how a belief affects an action, affects an outcome.
All right, maybe. And my thought is, my action to outcome is in a way how I present the action, per se. If I just come up and decide that I don't think I like the coffee that you're drinking, I like a different kind. That's gonna have one outcome. If I say, I think that's the stupidest coffee I ever had, why do you even drink that? That gets a whole other outcome. Just out of that kind of thing.
Sure. There you go.
You were talking headless.
Pretty good, huh? It's hard to be in two places at once.
Yeah. Yeah, so if you were to say, that's not coffee, you want to drink that here, dump it out, let me give you some real coffee. Now, that might be her favorite coffee, even though you think it's garbage, right? So now you're offended because you don't have what you want and you're putting your beliefs onto her through action. And the outcome is, well, she may just get kicked at you, or she may just feel dissatisfied because she doesn't have the coffee that she wants. Yeah, there's an example. What else? Give me another one.
I kind of think peer pressure works that way, maybe with kids, like if somebody's listening to a song and they like it and somebody else is like, oh, that song's awful, that artist, I can't stand them, stupid music, then somebody else stops listening to it because their friend doesn't like it, and then they start to question, oh, so maybe I don't know anything about music.
There you go. So the belief then is not about the music, it's about themselves, right? My opinions don't matter, or I'm not well enough informed, or I'm not smart enough or good enough to make these decisions, so I have to follow my peers, and whatever they say. You going for Mike? Okay.
It's okay. I don't know if this is actually part of that, but I'm at the age where I am getting more and more diseases or more and more illnesses or whatever. And I went to the nurse practitioner last Thursday and she said, oh, you have this now. And I'm like, wait a minute. I have to process things before we go into the next action. And so I'm processing, I'm working on things, and hopefully the outcome in 3 months will be I'm either okay or go see another specialist and go on from there. So I don't know if that works into it or not.
It does. So for example, if you believe, you know what, they can't do anything for me, I'm still gonna keep getting illnesses and these weird diseases popping up out of nowhere, so heck with it. I might as well just eat and drink and do whatever the heck I want to, because it doesn't matter. Well, what's the outcome gonna be? Yeah, you're gonna be unhealthy. That becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So it is a wider overarching kind of narrative example. You know, growing up, my father left when I was 4. I didn't see him again until I was 16. So my narrative was, well, gosh, if your dad doesn't want to be around me, he must be a piece of garbage. So that was my narrative, right? And then I came to the point where I thought, well, gosh, he can't put that story on me. And then I realized he didn't. That was the story I wrote in reaction to what happened, right? And then so if I am then acting from that belief that I'm not worthy, whatever it is, and I'm doing things for other people to try to earn love or putting myself last or whatever it is because I think I'm unlovable or unworthy, well, the outcomes it's not going to be very healthy, right? I'm going to end up in toxic relationships. I'm going to end up in not succeeding myself because I'm always last, right? So you have to eventually come to the point where you go back to the belief, which is the narrative, and rewrite it. And so, interestingly, I would always ask my dad, right, why'd you leave? Why'd you leave? And he'd tell me a story, something else. And finally I said, when I think I stopped caring about the why, and I was more interested just to get to know his story. So I said, tell me about your relationship with Grandpa. And he's like, oh, so my grandpa was a Mormon bishop. And he's like, oh, Grandpa was all about the church. He was more, married to the church more than he was home and yada, yada, yada. When I was 13 and told him that I didn't want anything to do with the church anymore, he said, okay, you're not my son, goodbye. And so at 13, my dad hitchhiked from Salt Lake City to Seattle, got an apartment by himself. And, it's like, okay, now I get it. I see how your belief affected your actions and these outcomes, and then I inherited a story, wrote it for myself, which, right, created a cycle. And that's what we do. So there comes a point when we have to pause and question. Questions are super important, right? We're always seeking answers, but it's the questions that are more important. And the questions are, is my narrative really accurate? Is it really correct? A simpler example. So say, you've got it in your mind, you're gonna diet, you're gonna exercise, you're gonna get strict and get in shape and okay. And then a month later, you're like, what the heck? Nothing is any different, but I've been running every day. I run to the gym. I lift weights. I don't drink very much. I eat healthy. And then you question yourself, okay, so let's go over last week. Well, I went to the gym twice last week and I actually walked there. I didn't really run and I did have a lot of pizza and yeah, there was quite a bit of beer in there. And right, and then you're like, okay. The narrative was that I was doing a great job, but the reality was there's lots of incremental places where to step it up. And here's the key. not to go back and shame ourselves, right? I can't do anything right. I'm not gonna succeed here. Instead, it's, okay, little baby steps. Do one thing, commit tomorrow, you're gonna run all the way to the gym and still walk, or you're gonna run more than you did, or whatever, right? Okay, you do it and you celebrate that, not with a six pack, right? You pat yourself on the back, and then you set your next incremental step. We don't go from here to here, right? We go to here, here, we celebrate, and then here, and that's how we help ourselves rewrite that narrative. So in the healing process, it's the same thing. It's incremental. Right? We also have to remember that healing and cure are not synonymous. Okay? It's interesting that in the Bible that it always says Jesus healed so-and-so. It doesn't say that Jesus cured so-and-so. What's the difference between curing and healing?
Between what?
Curing and healing.
Curing and
Healing and curing.
Curing,
Mhm.
curing.
Curing is probably absence of disease, whereas healing could just be improvement.
Okay, so the absence of the disease versus the improvement, okay?
You took the words right out of my mouth.
He's like, what she said. What else?
Curing makes me think that there was something wrong, like it needed to be fixed, like you're cured, yay, you're cured. Whereas healing is like, oh, you're hurt, you're injured. I think healing is less of a negative or blaming.
Yeah. Okay, I like that. It's a good connotation.
I didn't understand.
So curing would be like, there's something wrong with you and you need to be fixed to go back to your, right, where healing is. How do you describe that?
Like if you were like, you were hurt or you were injured, like you needed to be healed. Healing makes me think of like helping,
Okay,
whereas curing makes me think of like fixing, like, ooh, you need to be fixed and I cured you,
Yeah.
whereas you're hurt and I need to help you heal. It's
Right.
just.
there's something wrong with you, so let's get you
Right,
get it
right.
straightened out, yeah. Yeah. So let's take, there was the Gerasene demoniac, remember the guy in chains out there, and then eventually Jesus said, who are you? And we're a legion, for we are many, right? And then they cast the demons into the pigs, but everybody's afraid of the guy out in the tombs. But then when he was healed, they were afraid. Like, what didn't make any sense? Well, if his affliction, whatever it was part of the result of society, like you're talking peer pressure, for example, right? Perhaps he was different, perhaps he had some physical deformity, or he had whatever, right? Even to say that word deformity is, right, that's conjecturing something. So whatever pressure they put on him, and all of a sudden they could use him as a scapegoat. Well, look, at least we're not like him. But then he's healed. Now does healing, let's say he only had one arm, let's just, right? Did he pop a new arm out? No. But he became okay with the reality of how people acted toward him, probably because he reframed his narrative about himself. He was no longer imprisoning himself, right? And when he became better, when he became healed, the other people were bothered because we can't use him anymore, right? We have to look at ourselves. I think there's a similar story when after the transfiguration, right? When Jesus comes down the mountain and the man's like, I begged your disciples to heal my son. Look at him, he's got something wrong with him that he gets thrown about and he has the seizures and I begged them to heal him, but they couldn't. No, they wouldn't, they couldn't, right? Well, perhaps their mindset about healing wasn't right. Perhaps they wanted to do what we often like to do, use our pithy little statements and sayings, and you know, it's like if somebody died, he's in a better place now. Oh, God needed a construction worker to build golden castles, right? And does that help? That doesn't help. Right, but maybe Jesus is like, you goofball generation, how long do I have to be with you? Right, and he went and he healed the kid who could have had body image issues, the kid who could have been bullied, the kid who could have anything, could have been a victim of racism or any other form of xenophobia, who knows, right? But Jesus helped him to become okay with his reality, to become comfortable with it, right? So you see the difference? We're not necessarily changing the situation, but such as any cure. Oh, the cancer's gone. Versus I've become comfortable with my mortality, and I'm going to focus on quality of life over quantity of life. It's a form of healing. So I'm going to read a couple of poems, and I want you, we're just going to spend a little bit of time focusing on what our reactions are to them, okay? So the first one is called Let This Darkness Be a Bell Tower by Reverend. Quiet friend who has come so far, feel how your breathing makes more space around you. Let this darkness be a bell tower, and you the bell. As you ring, what batters you becomes your strength. Move back and forth into the change. What is it like, such intensity of pain? If the drink is bitter, turn yourself to wine. In this uncontainable night, be the mystery at the crossroads of your senses, the meaning discovered there. And if the world has ceased to hear you, say to the silent earth, I flow. To the rushing water, speak, I am. So I'm going to read it one more time. Quiet friend who has come so far, feel how your breathing makes more space around you. Let this darkness be a bell tower, and you the bell. As you ring, what batters you becomes your strength. Move back and forth into the change. What is it like, such intensity of pain? If the drink is bitter, turn yourself to wine. In this uncontainable night, be the mystery at the crossroads of your senses, the meaning discovered there. And if the world has ceased to hear you, say to the silent earth, I flow. To the rushing water, speak, I am. So what does that say to you?
Kind of what I heard was imagining someone that everything seems to be happening to. And instead of just basically like cowering there and just taking your breath in and still inhabit your space, and be more of an active part. You can be an active part of making yourself better.
Like that. So inhabit your space. Those are beautiful words. And play an active part in living, right? Inhabit, live.
Yeah.
Live in that space. Don't just occupy the space, but inhabit it. There's a difference.
Right. And it's, because otherwise you get the darkness that's coming in. If you inhabit your space, you do keep the darkness out.
Or embrace the darkness, right? Not see it as a bad thing.
Right.
Because mystery no longer becomes scary. And it's like Gandhi, right? Become the change you want to see.
So I think it's interesting because I was, when the first time I heard it, it actually reminded me of something that I would read like when I had cancer. And that I almost took it like a letting go, like embrace like what's coming next, like when you said, you know, be comfortable with mortality, like the next place and the darkness and the one with air and everything. So I took it as almost like accepting like what is coming next. So that was the first time you read it. And then the second time you read it, it actually made me think of Jesus and like when the crucifixion was coming and knowing like this is what's coming next, but I'm gonna be one with the air. Yeah.
What I heard was a good friend telling me, you are enough.
Mm. Yeah,
A good friend telling me, you are enough,
yeah,
just the way you are.
yeah. Yeah, especially the last parts, right? Say to the silent earth, I flow. Speak to the rushing waters, I am. How much power is in those words? Two simple words, I am. Now, a lot of times when we hear that, we think of, you know, the I am, right? The burning bush and all of that. And that wasn't just a message of God saying, I am greater than thou, deal with it. It was an example that Jesus also embodied in the New Testament, his I am statements. I am that you might be. You might be remembered of who you are. Right? Do this in remembrance of me. What else? I like poetry because we tend to live in our heads. I know I do. It's a safe place. If I rationalize, I don't have to feel as much. Right? And also rationalizing keeps us stuck in our beliefs so that we keep reacting the same doggone way and getting the same doggone results all the time. Now, that doesn't happen in churches, but outside of churches, it happens all the time. Okay, thank God you got the joke, because if you didn't, I was just gonna say, okay. Yeah, but churches are comprised of what?
People.
People. We're people. But beautifully and wonderfully made, and we're still people. So that kind of, the poetry gets us to another place, so that we can get out of our heads for a moment. What else? What about that idea of becoming the pain? If the drink is bitter, become the wine. Right? You're in the bell tower, become the bell, and that which batters you makes you grow. What do we tend to do when we feel hurt or dis-ease or
Withdraw.
withdraw? Abort, run. Then what? Fight or flight. Oh boy, here we go again. The home, the abyss. In the beginning, the spirit hovered over the face of the deep. Well, what are some other words that we call that face of the deep?
Wilderness.
Wilderness, yeah, that's a good one.
Out there.
Out there, yeah. Yeah. Something that's not in here and something that's not, has nothing to do with us. It's foreign, it's different, it's mystery. Other.
Emptiness.
Emptiness, void, right? Right, over the face of the void is another translation. Chaos, have we ever heard that used before? Right? the face of chaos,
Storm.
the storm. All of these kind of connotations, right? Not very warm and fuzzy. What if, I wonder, what if, instead of seeing the tantalum, the abyss, as something scary and mysterious and something to be avoided at all costs and turned back from, what if we saw it as the source of infinite beauty and creativity? What if the spirit was dancing over the face of the deep to draw out the potential? Now, there's nothing, we're not changing verse. Spirit hovered, vibrated, danced over the face of the deep, and brought out that which was already in there. Right? Brought it into form, brought it into being. My point is, instead of looking at mystery as something scary, what's going to happen to us as a church? Where are we going? If we don't do things we used to, the way we used to, or if we don't do this, or we can't allow that. We're going to have to put our foot down on this one. We allow mystery to unfold and lean into the darkness. Not darkness is a bad thing, right? The darkness as in, I can't see what's coming next or what's right in front of me. Things could actually be pretty good. Thomas Merton, one of my favorites. What can we gain by sailing to the moon if we are not able to cross the abyss that separates us from ourselves? This is the most important of all voyages of discovery, and without it, all the rest are not only useless, but disastrous. So he's saying the abyss is within us, and it's this thing that what does it do to sail the moon or Elon Musk or anybody that take a rocket out to space if you're not willing to take that voyage across your inner abyss that separates us from ourselves or our true self, as you would say. Right? If you don't do it, it's not only useless, but it's disastrous. At your own peril. Go ahead, don't take the journey, don't cross the abyss and figure things out. Good luck with that, because you're only going to hurt yourself and others. So we have to embrace mystery. Let's look at the word atonement. So look at those words. There's really kind of like 3 words in there. At one moment. At one moment. So the cross, Jesus achieved lots of things, but one is a reminder of our at-one-ment with God and with all beings. So if we are interconnected with one another, that really kind of changes our mindset about things. Because we talk about other, right? Yeah, those people over there, or that person who believes this way or that, right? Could be on religious lines, could be on political lines, could be on racial lines, could be on ethnic lines, could be on whatever, right? There's us and there's them, and it's all arbitrary. When I was living in Japan, a Buddhist priest came up from the seminary in Kyoto up to Tokyo to where we were at, and he gave a sermon, and he said, "You got it so far?" So, what he said was, a tadpole will naturally become a frog. What happens? But a human baby will not naturally become a humane human being. Without first learning love, kindness, respect, and compassion, one cannot consider oneself a humane human being. And he went on to say, however, if one becomes aware of their interconnectedness with others, exhibits love, kindness, compassion, and acts out of that. In other words, it says, if one considers the effects of their words and their actions on others before they say or do that, that's what it means to become enlightened. That's what it means to become a Buddha. Now, when he said that, I'm sure I said, holy, bleep, whatever in my head. I'm like, I think that was Jesus' message before the church ruined it. Right? Love, kindness, respect, and compassion. That's what we need for ourselves first, and then for one another. Okay? And the awareness of our interconnectedness. Because if I am, even if you and I don't agree politically, for example, right? But if I know we're interconnected, it's really hard for me to other you when you are part of me and I am part of you. We haven't had one yet. So that I am statement is so important. Because if we don't love ourselves first and treat ourselves, so here's the thing. Christian theology has become so toxic when it comes to the self, right? You've got the Catholic guilt, you've got our theology that we're just not good, we're dirty, we're tainted, yeah, it's Adam and Eve's fault, but still, we're yucky. And if it weren't for the love and grace of Jesus Christ, my goodness, we'd be in a bind. Okay. Why are we yucky? What happened to the beautifully and wonderfully made part of the equation? We have to love ourselves first. Because we think of it, oh, that's selfish. If I love myself, that's selfish. I gotta put everybody else first. And no. Love yourself first. Treat yourself as if you love yourself. Think about that. See, you've got your kids or your spouse or whomever you love so deeply. I've got 3 kids, and I think how I would treat them and everything I would do for them or whatever. Well, gosh, why? I love myself. Why wouldn't I do the same for myself? And then I'm healthy. Then I'm centered. Then I'm able to serve them in a way that's actually meaningful. Right? Then I'm able to be an example for them. It's a big difference. But I think because of our overarching theology, a lot of times in churches we don't think of ourselves as so great. And we don't think of ourselves as a whole is so great, although our egos say we are, right? You know what? We are awesome. They need us. They need what we have. They just don't know it yet. If we could just get them in the door, they would see how welcoming and kind we are, and they would experience the love of God through us. And we would grow. Brought to you from 1952. How's that been going for us? It hasn't. It hasn't. Let me, after I share these couple more, then we're going to get into the work part. And it's not work, but it's the doing of the healing or the anger or whatever is going on, right? Because we all have it. We all have it. Okay, so remember that I am. This is called What You Missed That Day You Were Absent from 4th grade. Mrs. Nelson explained how to stand still and listen to the wind, how to find meaning in pumping gas, how how peeling potatoes can be a form of prayer. She took questions on how not to feel lost in the dark. After lunch, she distributed worksheets that covered ways to remember your grandfather's voice. Then the class discussed falling asleep without feeling you had forgotten to do something else, something important, and how to believe the house you wake in is your home. This prompted Mrs. Nelson to draw a chalkboard diagram detailing how to chant the Psalms during cigarette breaks, and how not to squirm for sound when your own thoughts are all you hear. Also, that you have enough. The English lesson was that I am is a complete sentence. And just before the afternoon bell, she made the math equation look easy. The one that proves that hundreds of questions and feeling cold and all those nights spent looking for whatever it was you lost in one person add up to something. Wish I could write that. I am is a complete sentence. That was the English lesson for the day. Why not? Sorry, English lesson. So, a lot of times our anger, our perception of shame, or all of those things come from a sense of grief. What is grief?
Losing something.
Losing something, okay, yeah, so it's that feeling that happens after loss.
Microphone.
Pain. Sadness. What types of events or things could cause grief?
Illness,
Illness. Death. So death is obvious, right? There's a loss. What are we losing in illness?
my ex has Alzheimer's and he's
Hold on.
Oops.
Folks at home still need to hear.
My ex has Alzheimer's. He is not dealing with it. And two of my children who live near him have to try to deal with it. And I'm experiencing a lot of anger at him. And they're experiencing not only anger, but grief because of what he's going through and what they're having to go through.
So let's go to your anger. Where does your anger at him come from?
I'm angry because he won't even try to listen. I mean, I realize that part of it is the Alzheimer's, but it's his personality also. And they have tried for several years to get him help. And now it's to the point where they've just about given up. And they're just gonna let him live his life and deal with whatever comes.
Yeah.
Which is going to be very, very difficult.
Right. And you said the kids are grief, is that what they're experiencing?
I think so. I don't think they realize it. As my son said, it's upsetting to him that his kids won't know their grandfather. They only think he's a very strange man. He's weird. It's my youngest granddaughter said, "Grandpa's weird." But you know, and they don't know him any other way. Because he's slowly progressed, and that's all they'll remember, is that he was weird. And that their father and their aunt kept trying to help, but grandpa wouldn't listen.
So I'm glad you brought up the example of Alzheimer's. It's helpful for me as a segue. So you've got the grandkids and your kids grieving the loss of who this person was. You got the grandkids that'll be grieving something that never was. That's another thing you can grieve, right? Grieving the thing you never did get to have. And you also have this person who's alive, somebody who's still there, but they're also not. And as they progress and become a 7A and a 7B and a 7C on the fast scale and lose cognition, different things, they're not. They're there, but they're not. We call that ambiguous loss. Ambiguous loss is a term that was coined when, after the Vietnam War, when people didn't come back. You assumed they were dead. They could have been POWs, not really sure, but you never recovered the body. So you didn't get that sense of closure. I think closure might be illusory, but right, you didn't get the sense of closure by having a body and then doing the funeral and doing the rituals that you need to. And in the same way with Alzheimer's or any form of dementia, you have this person who is, but yet not who they were. And that can happen in churches or anywhere. Yeah.
So back when I was working, I used to facilitate support groups. And we have this story that we always shared when we talk about grief that was, imagine if you were going on a trip and you were going to Italy and you saved all your life to go to Italy and you spent a year learning Italian and you packed your bags and you got on the plane and you fell asleep. And you woke up when the plane landed and you were in Holland. And there was nothing Italian and there were tulips and you didn't speak the language and you were stuck there because Italy was gone. And nobody knew what happened and Italy was just gone. And before you could like Holland and like tulips and like windmills and like wooden shoes, you had to grieve the loss of Italy. And so to me, a lot of grief has to do with change and unfulfilled expectations.
Love that example. When I was living in Japan, I did not want to come back. I thought I was just going to stay there the rest of my life because I just hated home and didn't. I was like, do not send me. But I used to have these dreams that I was back home. Like I wake up, like waking up in a dream, right? And I'm back in my village of 87 people south of Rockford, where I grew up, in the cornfields, and I'm like, no, why am I here? This isn't, no, what happened? But yeah, you prepared, you had an expectation, and then you ended up with this. And this might not be bad. This is not what you were planning for or what you expected. So part of it is adapting to another form of good. Right? There are many forms of good. There are many ways to win, but we get stuck on one. A win looks like this. According to who? And as a church, are we here to make wins, or are we here to do what God is calling us to do out there and in here? Right? So that goes back to our narrative. Why are we here? And we'll get into that in a future session, but we don't take the time to think, who are we? What's our purpose? Why are we here? So grief. So anger as a secondary emotion is something that usually has something to do with the ego. Now, when I say ego, a lot of times we use that as a pejorative term, and I'm not using it that way right now. Okay, so we've got what I would call our true self, right? That's that us that we're seeking to become during Lent. That's the journey into the wilderness to become this person. That's the journey across the abyss that Thomas Merton's talking about. We are becoming. In the book of Revelation 2:17, there is a verse there that says, to those, and here's the usual translation, okay? To those who are victorious, or to those who have overcome, I will give a smooth white stone, and upon that stone shall be written a name, and only those who receive it shall understand that name. Well, Greek doesn't really have a past settled tense, right? It's what they call the aorist. In other words, it's always progressing. So it doesn't make sense to have a word that says become or overcome or we're victorious, right? Because that means it happened, it's done, and now everything is just past. Yet the best translation I've seen, to those who are becoming, I will give a smooth white stone, and upon that stone shall be written a name. Those who receive it shall understand it. I think that's powerful. And I think that's really powerful. Those who are victorious, who overcome what? What are we, right? Is there ever a point when we as an individual or as a church group are going to say, we're there? We're in process, we are becoming. But sometimes we get stuck along the way by looking at a place and saying, no, there, that's where we need to be. And then when you end up in Holland instead of Italy, you're like, all right, somebody's gonna pay for this. I need to figure out who and assign some blame, and then I need some closure to get that person to apologize, right? It's processes, it's fine, we all do it. The key here is to recognize it. So now, as human beings, we all have our anger, right? Again, secondary emotion that's coming from something in our ego that has been put there by ourselves, some narrative, some belief, some story, right, that hurt us most likely, that therefore elicited anger as a defense mechanism. Which eventually could lead to shame. So for example, if I feel you've harmed me and I get ticked and I go off on you and just start cussing the heck out of you right here in front of everybody, or even just by ourselves, but afterward I feel horrible. I'm such an idiot. Oh, what do I do there? Now I'm shaming myself. However, out of that shame, it's not likely that I'm going to go to you and say, I'm sorry for being such an idiot. I'm probably going to put up a higher wall and a thicker wall. Because I already think I'm an idiot. So now I got to protect myself more. So you see how that process unfolds? And so we build walls around ourselves. And we plant our poles of belief firmly in the ground and say, nope, this is where I'm at. I'm not budging until you see things my way. And then comes the grief. Well, because we've all become this way in our own little silos, we're not becoming that which we want to become, and so we're grieving that. Right? We're grieving that loss of realization of the reality that we feel called to. I'm grieving the loss of relationship. I'm grieving the loss of my best and truest self that didn't show up in that moment. And yes, we are grieving, yes, things aren't the way they used to be. The church that I pastor on the north side of Chicago used to have 100 kids in Sunday school. We have 5 kids in Sunday school. It's like, hallelujah, right? There's a lot to grieve there, but we also don't need the shame aspect. So, all right, I've rambled enough. Here in this space, let's do a little Brandyn Brown here, right? let's be vulnerable. Let's do the story I'm telling myself is. What is the story? What is your anger, if you feel angry, what are you angry about? And it's okay to say it. If she ticked you off, let's talk about that. If she ticked you off, let's talk about that. If I'm ticking you off right now, keep it to yourself. Or if you feel hurt, or if you feel grief, is that where we can discover what is needed for us to move forward together? And it doesn't have to be a blaming, by the way. It doesn't have to be somebody kicked you out. You can just be feeling a certain way about a situation.
I guess my grief is that the lack of people that are here right now. Or on Zoom.
Or on Zoom. Okay, so
I got no excuse not to be here.
Well, there's a few people,
doggone
they're out of town or they're.
There are-
it. Yeah,
That's true. Some do.
There's 4 people that I know that are out of town, so that's, I don't know anyone else why that what they're experiencing.
so, okay, so let's dig into that. People aren't here. There is an expectation or a hope that there will be more people, right? And what has been lost? What do we feel has been lost by them not being here?
Chance to move forward.
Microphone. Oh, or repeat it.
The chance to move forward.
Possibly a lack of interest.
A lack of interest, feels like they don't care.
Exactly.
Well, gee, if they don't give a rat's to, as my mother would say, to be here, then how are we gonna do anything? They're either going to be the people that just don't participate and we're gonna have to do it ourselves, or they're gonna be the detractors, they're gonna hold us back. Is there not being here a statement? Are they saying, well, things are never gonna change anyway, so I'm not gonna bother? Or I don't agree with this process, therefore I'm voting with my feet. Right? A lot of stories come out of that grief. Good. Yeah.
I'm tired. It's exhausting. And personally, I'm tired of feeling like I'm a new person. I've been a member of this church for 22 years, but I didn't grow up here and I'm still new. When I say things in meetings, I sometimes feel like I have to preface it to explain like why I'm knowledgeable about it. Even when I told you that story, I said I used to run support groups. Because I'm a new person in the church, sometimes I feel like I'm not listened to, my ideas aren't listened to. I feel like I have to be overly assertive. Like, I think we should do this. I'm going to do this. I don't know.
Appreciate that. I'm tired. Tired of not being heard. Tired of not feeling like I fit in. Tired of things not changing. Like we're just a hamster on a wheel. Spending energy, but things don't change, and then some people don't have the decency to show up.
Are you trying to get us into secondary anger?
Heck yeah, I've got torches and pitchforks in my trunk for you when we get there. You know where these people live, right? Okay. And if you people watch this recording later, just know that we love you. What else? What else have you felt or experienced?
I think expectations, and this is not only in the church, but look at our lives in the past 2 years with the pandemic. Life as we know it, it's nothing that we ever expected. And it's like being dealt a curveball of Again, so you could take it in the setting of the church, but think of our lives too. I can think of how many families we've talked to, not to get on the COVID just a little tangent of thinking of beliefs, or, oh, my family will all be on board for vaccines, or they'll have this belief for my grandkids. And yet, so when those expectations don't end up, we go through grief.
Yeah.
It's a new reality.
Yes, that's a good way to put it. It's the new reality. So we're also going to talk later in another time about change and transition and how they're not the same thing. Right, but the pandemic has shown us that change is a real thing. That, right? I mean, it's came and slapped us in the face. But change has always been there. Is this, for those of you who've been here for a minute, does this neighborhood look the same as it did 20 years ago, let alone 30, 40 plus?
No.
No. Right, the landscape looks different, the demographics, I'm sure, are different. Right,
The attitude of the people are different.
the attitude of people are different.
When I'm looking around this room, we have not been members here for a long time. We've been in church, but we haven't been here in this community. And I only see a couple of people who were here when we first started coming to church. Now, of course, we've all aged, and some of those things keep people from coming, but I remember you. And I remember you standing up and saying, we're gonna be doing this little something for little kids, and people could be feel free to bring their kids, and I always thought that was great, that you said.
You were.
And you're still doing it. The kids are bigger, so.
That's great. So yes, the change is not only happening out there, it's happening in here. None of us is getting a day younger. Yeah, and in here, right? So yeah, look at these concentric circles, right? We've got change that's happening out there, the change that's happening here within this building, and the change that's happening here. We're not the same people, it's individuals that we were. Anybody who's lived through wars, or lived through pandemics, or experienced tragedy or trauma, or even good things, it's changed by them. We're not the same people. And there's also the intentional self-growth part. Hopefully we're on that journey too, and we've grown as human beings, and we're not the same people that we were before. Right? When you think about biologically, it's the senescence, right? Physically, we're not the same people we were 7 years ago. Every cell that was in our body at that point is gone. Right? So however many sevens you can divide into your age, that's how many times you technically died and come back. An interesting thing to think about. And especially now during Lent, when that is the journey, right? To be aware of mortality, not only physical mortality, but the death of the old self, the birth of the new self. To go through this journey and to lean into it. Look at Jesus' temptations. These are all things that we face every day. Go ahead, turn this rock into a loaf of bread. Well, because when you read the passage, he'd been in the wilderness for 40 days, and then he was tempted. So he's hungry. He says, nah. It's been said, man shall not live by bread alone. Well, what's really going on there? We all have that temptation to take the easy way out. I'm hungry, I've got no money. There's an ethics issue here, but I think it's justified if I steal this stuff. Right? Or I can take the easy way out here. My grandpa used to say, boy, if a job's worth doing, it's worth doing right. But I might know that I'm cutting a corner. I didn't notice that I didn't sweep that corner, or under the couch, or whatever. Nobody's gonna notice. Yeah, they actually probably will, and I'll know. It's gonna bother me until I go back and do it right, so I might as well just do it right the first time. Measure twice, cut once. And all these different ways that we are tempted in our life, right, to do things the easy way, to cut corners, to take something that's not ours without putting the effort into it. Well, okay, well, go up there on the pinnacle. Let's see. Well, first let's go to the hilltop and look at it. You want all this? All you gotta do is bow down to me and it's yours. That idea of power, how illusory, but how beautiful. Give me power. Give me authority. Yeah. Actually, it's not yours to give. Okay, go up on the pinnacle, jump down. Says you won't even hurt your foot on a rock. You'll be fine. Yeah, no, I'm not going to tempt fate. I'm running a little late. I could probably get away with doing 100 down 355 and probably won't get a ticket and probably won't get into an accident. Yeah, let's not tempt that. Right? Or other simple examples where we're tempting fate, so to speak. So all these examples are things that Jesus is saying, I'm a human being too, right? I'm experiencing this. I am an example for you, showing you that I get it. These are temptations, but we don't have to take that road. Don't have to take that road. Because if you look in there, Satan has a small s. Most of the time, when you find these stories of the accuser or the adversary or Satan or the serpent, they have a small s. Where is this tempter with the small t? Where does it exist? Yeah, right here. We're not talking about, oh, Lucifer with his horns and stuff, and let's, I'm not even gonna get into that theology. But, right, it's in here. That's for us to work on and to grow from. What else? Let's keep going. What's the healing, the grief rather, the hurt. If there's anger that's being felt.
I'm grieving for the music.
Okay, what about the music?
We don't really have it.
Okay.
And we don't have the people to make it. And that has been such a huge part of worship and what church was for me, that is something that I grieve for. But I'm determined not to let that keep me from being part of the church. Because that's part of worship, but I don't think that's part of what the real meaning of the church is.
Okay, so let's keep going deeper into that. So you're grieving the lack of, is it lack of choir director and choir or what?
Choir director, pianist, organist,
Okay. The whole
the
shebang.
whole shebang is missing.
Okay. What does having all that do for you that you are proceeding a loss?
It gives me a lightness.
Mm.
That's the part where I can really let my mind go, my spirit go, and that part is missing.
Yeah. Gets you to a place of peace.
Yes.
Yeah. So you're really grieving that
Yes.
loss of a sense of peace.
Yes.
That place, that inner place. Yeah. Good. Thank you. The next question becomes, and we're not done with this, but the next question becomes, what are you willing to do about it? Right? Because grief is healthy. We need to go through grief. I was a grief counselor in hospice. We need to do that. It's a process, right? It's a process. And it's not like suddenly this switch is flipped and everything's okay suddenly. Doesn't work that way. It's things are okay despite the fact that they're not. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Doesn't say it's not a promise to take you out of the shadow of death, the valley of the shadow of death. It never says that. Despite the fact that I'm here, I'm going to find peace. So what could you do to either, it could go many ways, right? You could influence the music or lack thereof, or find another way to find that inner peace, or so what works for you?
Trying to think of other things that can give me the same type of feeling that don't require someone who has the special skills.
There you go. Right.
Yeah.
Maybe some collaboration.
She just said if I find
I
it.
know, I heard, I was like, good place, like. Good. What else?
Okay, so when you were talking about music, it made me think how dependent we are on a few people. And I don't know if anybody in this room remembers Norma's story, but when I first 22 years ago came to this church, Norma's story was Christian education. That was her, and it was all her. And when Norma died, there was this huge void, and Pat McCure, Larry, Randy, Pat and Randy, it just in my mind, really stepped up and jumped in. And then further down the road, Barb became involved, other people became involved with CE. Phyllis joined CE, and but in the beginning, it was Norma, and Norma like set the tone, and everybody, when she was gone, there was, like you said, that void. And I feel like that's where our music program is at, because we had two people that were just such an integral part, and my son became involved with it because of those two people. And we lost both of those people. They both passed away in such a very short time. And I feel like as a church, we're still hung up in that grieving of they're gone. And I feel like almost we're all waiting. I know my son is waiting. Like, who's gonna step into that void with music? And I don't know. But it reminds me of that our church has patterns where because we've been around for so long, like what do we do? How do we fill that void? I don't know. It's there.
Well, and on top of that, I think it is the COVID that has caused us to have so many changes within this church and people not feeling safe coming to the church. All the mask wearing and all of that.
Yeah, COVID has done a lot to church, right? It's a lot of churches have closed during the pandemic. They weren't closing before, but you've got some people who are like, I don't need to go to church. I just realized that I don't actually have to be there. There are other outlets for me to bring me a feeling of centeredness or joy, or to feed me intellectually and spiritually. I don't have to do that at church. There are others who are like, well, I can do it through Zoom. I don't have to be there, right? There are others who are, I would love to be there, but I still don't, I'm not there. Just don't feel safe yet. I'm still pretty freaked out about all this, right? There and many, many more, right? So yes, it's done a lot to church. And from what you said, it brings to mind there is a time to pause and to mourn. And then the grieving continues. Right? We said the grieving doesn't go away. We also realize that grief is not a sadness. It's not a great sadness. It's not the long loneliness. There's also joy in grief. There are a lot of emotions in grief. And we need to allow for that. And allow for it to come and go in ebbs and flows. It's not, okay, here we are, right? A lot of times we look at Elizabeth Kubler-Ross on her stages of grief. Those were not for the people left behind. Those were for the people who were dying. And some would argue they're not even that accurate anyway. Nonetheless, we don't go through nice, pretty clean stages of grief. Okay, I'm through this stage. Now I'm in this stage. Nope. So allow that grief. There's joy in grief, there's happiness in grief, there's celebration in grief. And it's not only the so-called sad things that we need to grieve. For example, you are on a team of software developers working at a bank, and you've been working on this project for a year, and the bank decides that, or you finish the project, yay. And the bank says, okay, this team's purpose is fulfilled. You were developing, you're done. You're not the ones gonna run the project, so now you're disbanded and you're gonna be placed elsewhere. That's a time to grieve. You have a different role. You've had a major shift in your life. Grieve that. It's not, you don't have to be sad, but grieve it. Same tech team, and the bank says, you know what, actually we hired some consultants and we pulled the plug on this project and we're gonna actually go a different direction. So thanks for putting 2 years on this project. And I know you thought we were rolling it out in 2 months, but no. Oh, well, now there's the loss of the sense of purpose that we had for doing this thing for the past 2 years. And again, the loss of identity. Okay, anybody retired in here? I was just wondering, thought there might be a chance. So how did you experience retirement? Like that day when you punched the clock for the last time or got that gold watch or whatever happened on the way out the door and you took the pictures off your desk and you're like, adios.
Love it.
Love it.
I agree, but only for a week, but still it was there maybe
Right.
3 to 4 weeks before I actually did walk out the back door.
Okay,
But I did grieve up until.
Microphone, please, so they can hear.
okay,
Okay, I'm sorry.
sure.
I was grieving because I felt that. I didn't feel that I was pushed out the door, but I was offered out the door because of my age.
Okay.
And I grieved because I knew that once I signed the paperwork, there was no going back.
Mm.
So,
What do you lose?
but after a week,
Mhm.
you realize your freedom. And that's something I did not have before.
Yeah.
The freedom to wake up every morning and choose what I wanted to do for the day. And I know there's a lot of dependencies when a person retires, health,
Mhm.
financial well-being, choices.
Yeah.
But yes, I think some people go through grieving because you're missing your routine that you had for years and years and years. You miss the people. You miss the sameness of every day.
Mhm.
When you realize that your day doesn't have to be the sameness anymore. It's hallelujah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, there's a loss of identity that happens when you retire. You were that engineer, you were the senior VP of operations at XYZ Corporation, you were a secretary, you were whatever. And now you're not. How often do we ask, tell me about who you are? What do you do? I'm an attorney, I'm a doctor, I'm this, I'm that, I'm a pastor. So what? Who are you? So to carry that over,
For me, it was, I missed the people and I work in a way, but at the same time, I got to go play with my trains and spend more time with all the other people that I couldn't do before because I had to go to work. So it was a good thing.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, it's definitely usually a good thing, right? But because it's such a good thing, woo-hoo, I'm gonna play a lot of golf, spend a lot of time in Florida. I also don't grieve. I don't think of grieving because it feels good, but it's a major change, so we have to grieve it. It doesn't mean we have to sit there and wallow in tears. It's not what grief has to look like. We just grieve that we're not the same person anymore. And celebrate the new reality. So he's saying it's a new reality. Whenever there's change, there's a new reality. And it takes, which we'll talk about, that intentional act of transition, right? An intentional psychological process on this transition to get into living into that change, living into that new reality. And transition is something that churches do. Just saying. Churches, right? I'm not pointing fingers. I'm saying churches in general, right? Do not do transition well. And there's so much transition. People die. The internal makeup looks different. The external makeup looks different. The deep internal makeup looks different. Pastors come and go. You might have an interim. You might have a settled pastor. There may have been some big hoopla over why that person left. Yada, yada, yada. There is an intentional transition process that has to occur each time there's a major shift. But churches are, we're good, let's just keep going. Well, all those let's just keep goings add up until you feel weighed down. And it's hard to keep moving forward. Keep going a little bit more on the grief. Grieving the music is really that loss of peace, loss of sentiments. Grieving the loss of these people is grieving their loss, of course, but it's also was grieving the loss of somebody who was running CD, somebody who was helping to bring in the kids or adult education or whatever, right? There was a loss, multiple losses. And people eventually stepped up. Where do we usually put the onus when it comes to getting things done in the church?
Someone else.
Someone else, definitely.
Pastor.
The pastor. Whose job is it to grow the church? Pastor. Whose job is it to go find a new CE person? Pastor. Whose job is it to get those young people in here? Pastor. Where'd that come from? How did we get into that mindset? Think about, no, she paid me to say that, but she didn't. But as a pastor, believe me, I know, right? So think about it. You're all retired from something, so think about it in corporate life, in the corporate world. You have a leader of a division or a leader of the whole company. Say you have a person who owns a machine shop, right, or a contract manufacturing shop. Does that person go out and work the brake press in the mill and do all that stuff?
On occasion, maybe.
Maybe on occasion, right? It depends, right? But in general, right, that's not a good use of her or his talents as a leader. That leader is there to empower those who are, the CNC operators and the brake press operators and the tube formers and end formers and whatever, to do their job well and to feel like they actually enjoy doing these things and that they have the resources to do these things, which comes from the operations manager. Okay, well, how can I work with you? How can I work with HR? Right? It's not going down and doing it, and it's also not managing. We have a lot of managers but not a lot of leaders. So let's focus on that for a minute. What would you say is the difference between managing and leading?
You can repeat it. It's the people, the manager deals with what's happening at the time and just tries to, real time, I guess you'd say,
Mhm.
deal with it real time.
Yeah,
The leader looks forward,
okay,
draws those people in.
okay. So a manager deals with what's going on right now, but a leader's looking forward. So a manager is reactive or a leader is proactive. Mhm.
I would add that I feel that a leader leads by example,
Mhm.
sets an example.
Yeah.
For either co-workers or trainees or interns to follow.
Right, yeah, so that's an example. And that example could look like different things. It could be actually doing that task, right, to say, here's how it's done. Or it could be a more overarching thing. Right, it could be a wider, like, I'm going to exhibit character. So that you might do the same in your own situation, right?
I think there's an element of trust with being a leader, whereas being a manager, like I have to manage and you're micromanage, like I have to manage, I have to make sure you do everything right because I don't trust that you will.
Yeah.
But if I'm a leader, okay, you know what you're supposed to do. You're, like I'm trusting you and I'm doing my own thing and leading and you're doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, so there is an element of trust. The manager is watching every single thing. You do this, you do that, you did that wrong. Do that right. The leader is, I've set the system in, I've created a good system with you. It's not unilateral. We have created a good system together. I trust that that system will work and that each part of that system will work. So what if that element of trust is misguided in that, for example, in the church, if everybody trusts that the pastor will do everything, and the pastor is trusting that the congregation will do their part, leverage their strengths, their joys, their passions, their talents. Right? The wheels kind of fall off the bus because everybody's saying, what, you were gonna do it, or I thought that was your job. Go ahead.
No,
Oh, okay. What about, when it comes to managers versus leaders, what about answers? Who wants to have all the answers? Yeah, the manager, right? The manager has something to prove. The manager wants to have all the answers. When somebody comes up to say, how do I do this? Let me tell you. Why is the sky blue? Let me tell you.
Manager says this has to get done.
Mm.
But the leader, this person comes in and says, this needs to be done, I'll take care of it.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Or we'll take care of it, right? Yeah. So a leader sets a system, a healthy system in place so that it gets taken care of, so that it gets done. So if the manager has, or thinks they have all the answers, what does the leader have?
yeah. The vision.
Vision, ideas, okay. We're gonna keep going with those. What else? What's the opposite of answers?
Questions.
Questions. Rilke, right? We read Feldhauer from Rilke. Rilke also said, don't try to have all the answers. They're like locked books in libraries that you wouldn't even understand. So look at questions. And if you look at questions, perhaps someday in the distant future, you'll live your way into the answers. Questions are what's key. And the leader has good, powerful questions, and then actively listens when there's a reply. And then through that process gets buy-in for the ideas, right? So when we look at buy-in, there's two ways to look at it. One is, okay, I'm the leader, really manager, and I say, okay, here's the plan. Okay, great idea. Here's how we're gonna grow the church. Here's what we're gonna do. And you all smile and good, right? You like it, right? Yeah. You on board? Yeah. We can do this together? Yeah. Okay. You didn't get buy-in. You got nodding heads, you got agreement, but you didn't get buy-in. What if I ask you, here's a magic wand. Sky's the limit. What are we gonna do? Well, we can do this, we can do, right? So I'm activating that prefrontal cortex, creativity, ideas, thinking, and people come up with ideas, and we're gonna do this later, actually, in appreciative inquiry. And the ideas come from here. And then more ideas come, and then those ideas are weeded down to what's the best ideas and what's gonna work for us in this context of who we are and what's around us. And how are we gonna do that? I think we can do it like this. I think we can do it like this. Okay. What passion do you have that's gonna lend to that? Well, gosh, I love dogs, I love whatever, right? Now what do I have? Genuine buy-in. Because who brought the idea? Right? Didn't come from the leader. So it has to be collaborative. We have to live the questions. If we live the questions, we are able to let go of our ego. Think about that. How is that the case? If we're living questions instead of answers, how are we able to let go of our ego that is easily angered?
An example of question.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Okay. So question for, again, depends on what the situation is, but what am I going to do to make the situation better? What resources do we already have that will get us there, wherever there is? What's in our past that has shown our resilience to do this? What are our passions? We've got that Howard Thurman quote, right? Don't ask what the world needs. Ask what brings you alive. So what the world needs is more people who have come alive. That's that part, the passion part. But what are you good at? What are your strengths? What's so important? But it's an equation. What are your passions? What are your strengths? And what is needed? Put those together, and that equals vocation, calling, purpose, call it whatever you want to. But everything aligns and stuff gets done. Well, I'm good at writing, but I really don't enjoy it. And nobody really needs that right now. Okay. So what purpose does it serve then? But if somebody says, hey, you know what, we need to redo our website and we really need some good content. Blog, you know, I've done a lot of writing here and there, and gosh, I love it. I just get so centered when I'm writing. Would you like to maintain our church blog? Oh, yeah, I love that. Okay. But what do we usually do? Put warm bodies in cool seats just to fill a spot. And it's another thing, kind of a teaser for another thing we'll get into, right? Is leadership development. Leadership development. We don't do it in churches. We put lay leaders in certain positions that have hard skills, hopefully, right? For example, well, I'm a retired teacher, therefore I'm going to run the Sunday school. Well, that makes sense. Makes sense. I'm a CPA, therefore I'm going to be the church treasurer. Makes sense. But what about the soft skills of leadership? If pastor's not the only leader in the church. If we're lay leaders, why not have a little training and in leadership to how do we run an effective meeting? How do we know what questions to ask? Different things like that. And all of a sudden, you have people leading together and things start to change.
Can I share something I'm grieving?
Yes.
Microphone.
I am grieving the fact that this is all you want me to do. When this is what I want to do. This is what I want to be. But all you want from me is this. I want to do this. So I'm grieving that.
Thank you.
Brenda, can you say the words, because I'm not sure everybody on the Zoom could read when we're pointing out
Oh,
leader and manage.
Okay, management is somebody who reacts, who has less trust in people. I should look at the camera. Who has all the answers, who has to get things done. Where a leader looks at future vision, is more trusting of people, asks you to live into the questions, has ideas and promotes ideas, is collaborative and seeks buy-in. Even when I was a manager at a bank, I did more of this than I did the management. I did do the management, but I was more of a leader when I was the manager of a bank branch. And ever since I've been a pastor, this is what everybody wants me to do, is manage. That's not my gifts. My gifts are this. But for 22 years, nobody wants this. Nobody wants this. They want this. I'll shut up now.
No, I appreciate the vulnerability and honesty. Really do. So how then can we create a more collaborative leadership model? Which allows the pastor to lead and not manage, and allows, right, for leadership to come from within the congregation as well.
As you said, it starts with knowing each other's gifts and where we fit in that model. There are managers here and there are leaders. Putting the right people in the right places.
Yeah, yeah. Knowing the gifts. There's also an element of self-awareness and what I would call systems thinking that comes in leadership. So the systems thinking means, say you're on the dance floor and you're not that tall, maybe you are, but you're not the tallest person in the room. And it's hard to see over everybody's heads. So I think I know what's going on over there, but I really can't see, so I'm gonna conjecture a little bit here. Or are you the type that knows the right questions to ask yourself to get up to the balcony so that you can see, oh, now I see what's happening, to be able to see the entire system. And therefore to know how each part affects the whole, how the whole affects the parts, how the parts affect each other, and what do I need to do to influence change in the system to make it work as efficiently as possible. That also means there's self-awareness, right? To say, well, how am I affecting the system positively or negatively? Am I creating an environment or a culture that's not vulnerable? Am I making people feel unsafe? Am I just jumping in with all the answers and not allowing space for people to think for themselves? Also, and it's not just negative stuff, it's part of it is the gifts, right? Anybody ever heard of the Clifton Strengths Assessment or Gallup? It's the same thing. So, you do this assessment, like a personality assessment type thing, and it tells you all your gifts and how they can be leveraged and whatnot. But it also tells you what to watch out for. So let me give you an example, because this has happened. My top three strengths, one is strategic thinking. My next top strength is, I think they call it data reflection. In other words, if I read a book or read something online or watch a movie, I've got a data bank in here that I can pull it out and turn it into a story to use as an illustration for something. And the third one is intuition. It's more that contemplative mindset, so that ability to see into people's feelings and to dig a little bit deeper into what lies beneath, so to speak. Okay, so the strategic thinking. So if there's a situation and people perceive it as a problem, I can go in, so it is a consultant, right? Go in and say, got it, okay, all right, I see the solution, right down the road, we're good, everything's fine, no problem. Now, if other people can't see that same thing that I can, they might experience me to be flippant or not even caring, right? You don't care about us, you're just sitting there saying everything's okay, and we don't feel okay. Well, I'm operating from a space of, what do you mean? It's fine, I've got the solution, it's right there, you don't see it? They're like, no, you're not showing it to us. Oh. Right? So that's, our gifts can also become an Achilles heel if we're not self-aware. So that our gifts have to be also used collaboratively. Maybe somebody else is better than I am at explaining what I'm seeing out there. So, hey, can you help me out here? Okay, so this is what I'm thinking. Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, that's not the language that they use, though. That's not going to connect well with them. Let me use their language and right, and then you explain it for me because you're better with words. And wow, we just collaborated, and now everybody sees the vision. Now, does that mean there's buy-in? No. There's only awareness of a vision. Now we need to go to the next step. So how then, let's relate it in our final few moments here, relate it then back to our grief. How can we, so we've got the grief, we've got the anger, we've got the hurt. How can good leadership practices help us to heal, help us to grieve, and help us not to be hurt going forward? Engagement. Mm-hmm. Tell me a little bit more about that. You're gonna get your steps in today.
We all are.
Yeah.
No. Engagement is getting that buy-in, people to grasp it versus just saying the words. Like we've heard folks today speak from the heart where their hurt is, where they're kind of have that, can't be just lip service, so to speak.
Yeah.
So good leaders do.
And did you catch what just happened there? You said engagement, and I said, tell me more. I engaged you, right? I could have just smiled and nodded and said, okay, engagement, sure. Don't know what you're talking about, but okay, right? Tell me more. Oh, okay, now we're engaging, right? I'm actively listening to you. That's engagement. Asking questions, that's engagement. Yeah, thank you.
Being authentic.
Mm.
And last night I couldn't find my phone cord, and I knew I had it in my car, and my middle child had driven my car, and I was mad that he took my car because he should have moved my car and taken his own car. But he took my car, so I was mad. And then I couldn't find my phone cord that I knew was in the car, and I went upstairs and I immediately, what did you do with my phone cord? And I yelled at him. And I accused him of doing something with my phone cord, and I said, because you took my car, and then I yelled at him about that. And then when I went outside at 1 o'clock in the morning and was looking frantically for my phone cord, because I still couldn't find it and I couldn't charge my phone, and my husband's working out of town, I found my phone cord underneath my car seat. And so I had to go back upstairs, and he was gaming and headphones, and I had to like interrupt him and apologize. I say, I'm really sorry. So anyway, being authentic, and we all make mistakes and we're all human, and it's not enough to realize you made the mistake, but you have to own it.
Yeah.
And I think I don't always do that.
But you do realize that you had gas in your car, and you probably did.
Right.
Oh, there you go.
So I still don't completely give him a pass.
Oh, boy. Yeah, because rats are always stealing our phone chargers. Well, it's true, and it's also a narrative that we, it's not always true.
Yes.
So what other scenarios may have occurred here? Oh, that's right. I use a Galaxy who uses an iPhone, so he probably unplugged my charger and plugged his in. Oh, or maybe I did it, or right. But when you're automatically, boom, little Brett did it again. Television, there's only one possibility here, and that's that. Took my phone cord. Then you go up there and you eat crow and apologize, and he's like, okay, whatever, Mom, I'm on a kill streak, go on.
Yes.
All right, give me 2 more examples and we'll get out of here.
Hold on.
Oh, yes, please.
Just a little private conversation.
Oh,
Which is an encouragement.
oh,
That was a good word. Yes, I received encouragement from Dave and Janet this morning,
good,
and I needed it. And it
good.
came at just the right time. And maybe we should bring our best selves to church,
Mm.
follow the golden rule, do
Mhm.
unto others as we would have them do unto you.
Yeah,
And that would just make the morning start off.
it would. And what if we took that golden rule and says, do unto others as we would do unto ourselves? That goes back to that I am, back to that self-love. What if I treated myself the way I treat my kids? The good parts in me. Hey, hon, you know what? You've been working. Go get a mani-pedi, go get a massage. Do that for myself. I'm self-sacrificing. That's what I'm supposed to do. I am a martyr for the cause.
Oh,
No, you're not. Take care of myself. Okay, last one. So yes, so encouragement. We all need that. We all have good days and bad days and good moments and bad moments. And especially if your gift is encouragement, do it. Let's uplift one another. That's something we can overlook. It's like that, gosh, no, I just feel like I should call Sally and just let her know I'm thinking about her, see how she's doing. But then that little voice says, oh, she's gonna think I'm silly for, that's just, no, I'm not gonna do it. Yes, do. All right, last one. How will good leadership on our part collaboratively result in less hurt, healthy grieving, healing,
Forgiveness,
forgiveness? And how, okay, yes, definitely. So let's unpack that a little bit. What does that look like?
not judging others.
Ah, okay, okay. So if we go a step deeper even, it's being aware that we have biases, right? And if we can operate from that point, say, yes, I am feeling this way. I don't have to kick myself in the butt for feeling this way, even though I know it's not necessarily logical. But that's because I have biases, right? And so I don't agree with you. And that's okay. Doesn't mean I have to judge you or feel judged by you if you don't agree with me. Because I don't remember if we're covering this or not. Are we doing healthy conflict or not?
yes.
Okay, so we'll do this too. Not all conflict is bad. It's good to disagree. That's how change happens. Forgiving. It's not an easy thing to do.
Knowing when to ask for help.
Mm,
Randy and I teach Sunday school. He teaches the little ones and I teach the older ones. And recently, a couple of my older ones asked questions and I'm like, that's a good question. for Pastor Brenda. I'll ask her. Well, then they went home and they asked Mom some questions. And she's like, that's a good question. I'll ask Pastor Brenda. So we ended up having a Zoom meeting because those kids are getting above my brain level. And Pastor Brenda and the mom and I and the kids talked it through, and we were able to answer their questions. And I think being a good leader, you need to learn to ask the questions and find out from other people their opinions, their knowledge on different things.
Yeah, so there's a lot of good things in that, right? There's being vulnerable enough to ask for help. There's the inclusivity of inviting others into the conversation and not trying to say, okay, this is the answer, done, period, here's where we're going. There's curiosity, because then we ask ourselves, I wonder. I was on sabbatical last year, hiking through the Rockies for 3 months. Every day, I asked myself, what am I curious about today? It's a good practice. And as we're curious, we might also ask ourselves, is it important? Does it really matter? Sometimes we latch on to things that really don't matter. So I'm going to leave you with this. Anybody ever heard of the Eisenhower Matrix? So you picture you got 4 quadrants, and then you've got urgency and importance. Right? So if it's urgent and important, which is over here for me, over here for you, get it done. It's got to be done. Go engage it, do it, get it done. If it's urgent but not important, right? Like, yeah, I do need to mail this, but it's not critical, but it doesn't need to go out, right? Or putting out fires type of thing. If there's somebody equipped to do that, ask for help, delegate. You don't go, if you're the leader, don't go out putting out all the fires. Then there's urgent but not important, or important but not urgent, rather. Right? So it's it needs to be done. It doesn't have to be done right now. Again, it can be delegated, or you can just put it on your calendar to do later. And then there's none of the above. Not urgent, not important. In church, that's where we spend most of our time. And the other stuff doesn't get done. And then we find out a week, 20 years, 50 years later, we're still exactly where we were because we're operating down here. We're focusing on things that aren't important and they're not urgent because of our beliefs that they were important and they were urgent, like the color of the carpet or how the pews are laid out or what kind of bread we use for communion or, right? I appreciate all of you being here. I hope that at least this has given you some more insights on how to work together, how to do collaborative leadership, and how it lends, again, to the healing process, because anybody or any group that says, we don't, nothing to heal, we're not mad, we're not hurt, we're not grieving anything, well, there's no self-awareness there whatsoever. It's a false story, but you all have shared it. That's not the case. You do have some things to grieve, some things to heal, but you're doing the work, and I commend you all for that. So thank you, and I look forward to seeing you the next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brandon. Let's have a word of prayer and then we'll dismiss. Holy One, we are grateful for this morning, for the sharing that has happened, for the learning that has happened. And we ask you to fill us with your Holy Spirit's power, to make the Holy Spirit present and help us access the Holy Spirit more and more, that we may become more self-aware, that we may become leaders for you, and that we may move forward and learn how to be vulnerable and accepting and work collaboratively. In the name of Jesus Christ, we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Bye, Ann, bye, Jill.
You actually have to wave over the camera.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's-
Bye.
Oh, so-
Thank you.
Okay, okay. So that's what I was looking at. And it's all-